Passing guard is probably one of the hardest offensive skills to develop. Training submissions, holding down positions can be even easier than passing the guard, especially if you're learning to pass against people who have a skilled guard. You're having to pass someone's legs, you're having to pass their hips, you're actually having to move around the strongest part of their body. Then you can also have to be able to pin and hold down that person as well. So in today's video, we're going to talk about how we can increase our chances of passing someone's guard. So stick around, we're going to dive into it right now. First off, let's define what we mean by passing the guard, because sometimes these terms can be a little bit confusing in the jiu-jitsu world. So what I mean by passing the guard is that you have moved around somebody's legs and they no longer have their legs connected to you. So typically, if you think of a side control or a mounted position or a back mount position, that would be a version of passing the guard completely. There will be times that as you pass, they will put you in half guard or maybe something called quarter guard where their legs are somewhat connected to you. It's not always a bad thing. We can still progress the pass from there. But today we're going to really focus on just the big picture of when it comes to passing the guard and what are some key areas that we can focus on. Now, first off, let's talk about some of the mistakes that students will make whenever they're passing the guard. And it really has to do with actually climbing what we call the skill ladder. The more skilled opponents that you tend to grapple, obviously the harder the guard's going to be. The problem that I normally see is that when students are taught to pass the guard or they're training with people at a relatively lower skill level, they think about passing the guard as one kind of motion. So if you imagine grabbing the ankles, throwing somebody's ankles out of the way, and then you drop chest to chest on them, that's kind of passing the guard in one fell swoop. It becomes less realistic over time. It becomes much harder to go from step 1 to step 4, for example. Eventually, what you need to start doing is passing the guard in these different phases. And when you pass the guard in multiple phases, it allows you to understand what are the key areas that you need to be paying attention to while you're passing. And there's these little tiny battles that are kind of happening all the time. And because you're fighting somebody's legs, it's going to feel like those battles are long and arduous, which they are. You're fighting somebody's legs. And if they're skilled, they're going to be good at recovering their guard. You want to think about passing the guard in 4 distinct phases. And so phase 1 means that you want to get past their ankles. And the reason for this is because if their feet can stay hooked onto your thighs, or they can play lasso guard, or they can hook underneath of your legs, or they can put their feet onto your hips, then they become a solid thing that prevents you from passing. So we have to first get past the feet or the ankles, and then we need to progress past the knees. Is that I'm getting both of my legs past their knee line, because if their knees are able to stay in front of me, they can use them to push me off. They can use them to swivel their hips out. They can use them to continue to move. Phase number 3 is once I get past the knees is to control the hips. So I need to lower myself down in a way to where I can put some type of wedges or put my body weight on top of their hips. If I don't control their hips, that's what allows them to turn on their side, to swivel their hip away, and to create movement to bring back in their knees and their ankles. Let's talk about phase number 4. And that is usually getting chest to chest or some type of upper body connection to them, right? If they expose their back, it could also be chest to back. But ultimately, I need to be able now to control the top position. So sometimes I can pass directly to side control. Sometimes I can pass directly to mount or back mount, depending on how my opponent reacts. If you can think about passing the guard in these 4 phases, then you now have your different targets you can start to aim for. And there's going to be times that you're going to get past the ankles and then they're going to recover. There's going to be times that they're going to get past the knees and they're going to recover. And then there's going to be times that you get almost all the way there. You're almost to phase 4. You get all the way to the hips and they recover. And this is really where that defeating or that attrition part of guard passing comes into play. Now let's talk about the 2 most common pathways to passing all four of these phases or moving past these four phases. I like to branch them into two categories. Other people categorize them in different ways, but I like two. I like simplicity. And that is basically splitting the legs or going around the legs. So if you were to think about very specific passes, such as a knee cut pass, right, that you've probably been taught, that is a version of going through somebody's legs. So you are stepping in between their legs, getting past the ankles. Your knee is cutting across their thigh. This brings you past their knees. Then you lower down to their hips. So you're in side control. That is hip control. And then you reach for their head or you get your chest to their chest. That's the upper body connection. So that's an example of all four of the phases being passed with splitting the legs, specifically with the knee cut pass. And then we have going around the legs. So an example of this might be a double under pass, for example. So both your hands go underneath the thighs, right? That's getting past the ankles. Now you start to lift them and you start walking around their body. That's getting past the knees. And then you lower yourself down so you can kind of control their hips. And then you get that chest to chest control. Once you've lowered yourself completely down, now you control that upper body. So that's going around the legs. And so you could kind of see that there are two different types of strategies there. You could split the legs or you could go around the legs. But either way, however you're doing it, you're trying to accomplish all four phases. Now let's talk about the different styles of passing. To use the two examples that we talked about in the pathways of splitting the legs and going around, we use the knee cut pass and the double under pass. Those are styles of what I would call more pressure or weight-based passing, meaning that you are applying your body weight to on top of their weight. And so you're able to start sinking your weight and controlling your weight on them. You are able to pass those four phases with different weight. Sometimes it's moving your body or moving their body around those areas. The other common way to do this is with more dynamic passing, meaning that you are stepping and you're using some athleticism moving around those four phases. So an example of this for going around their legs would be Toriando passing. So Toriando passing is a little bit more athletic. You're grabbing their legs, you're spinning them, or you're moving yourself, and then you're running around, and then you're setting yourself down, right? So that's one example. An example of splitting the legs or going through them might be things kind of like floating passing, right? So that's a little bit more dynamic because you're floating on top of people. You're kind of levitating, but we're kind of going through the legs or over the legs if you want to kind of count those in the same area. The best passers in the world are people who can combine pathways and styles. There are times that you're going to have to split the legs. There are times that you're going to have to go around the legs. Then there are times that you're going to have to be more pressure and weight based, and times you'll have to be more dynamic. So depending on what the situation calls for or what's working against a specific training partner might be the solution to what you need to do. Developing both, I think, is essential. I think only focusing on one is good for individual studying, but eventually the quicker you can make them come together, the better your overall passing will be. That's where I've seen it have success with me. Depending on your body type or your body style, if you're a bigger, heavier guy, maybe not as athletic, you're going to be more prone or probably attracted to the pressure passing. If you're a smaller, lighter individual, you're going to be more prone and attracted to the dynamic passing. My advice for each one of you guys is to still play in the other person's world, understand it, know how to combine it with what you do. 75% of the time, I'm a pressure passer and I use my weight in distribution, but there will be moments that will call for a little bit more of a dynamic approach. So you need to be able to switch and change gears. Same thing if you're the dynamic person. There are times that you're going to have to put your weight on people and be able to use that asset as well. There is no one perfect style that works for everybody. The four phases of passing, getting past your ankles, getting past the knees, controlling the hips, and then getting chest to chest. You have two pathways of really doing this. You can go between the legs or around the legs. And then you have two styles to go between or around the legs. You can do pressure based passing, or you can do more dynamic based passing. Figure out which one you tend to lean toward. Do you tend to lean toward more of a pressure or a dynamic? And then really focus on developing that. Learn how to apply that style on your training partner, and then learn how to branch out and connect it to the other one. And this will give you plenty of passing material to start to study and to start to develop. Make sure you leave this video a like. Also, make sure you leave it a comment so that way people know that this information is helpful, kind of gives up good signals to the YouTube algorithm. If you like this type of framework of training and developing your jiu-jitsu game, we call these thinking frameworks, and it's part of my overall grip system that I teach. So I'll be teaching a 6-week live training of this exact system. We will go into the other areas as well. So make sure you check out a link down in the description below, where the goal is we will get you developing and building your A game over the course of this 6 weeks. So until next time, I will see you guys later.